Oh, this is the PowerPoint outline for the Module 3 review. First, I'll discuss adapting and modifying the general education curriculum with the Universal Design for Learning. Adapting and modifying the general education curriculum just by providing the modifications or adaptations within the classroom. Next, I'll discuss the supplemental curricula for students with exceptional needs with the related services that we can provide, and more specifically, interventions in RTI for students with behavior and emotional needs. And finally, I'll be discussing supports for students with ADHD, which will be what I will be doing for my curriculum and design project. And then finally, the references. One of the best ways for adapting and modifying the general education curriculum really originates in architecture, the universal design, from when ramps were being built for wheelchairs, from when there were push automatic doors, there were sinks that were lowered to make them wheelchair accessible. Well, all of these things ended up benefiting many people. No longer were they just for people in wheelchairs, but the universal design actually provided benefits for children who couldn't reach the higher water fountains. They provided benefits for moms who had strollers and needed to push them up onto the curb, people carrying packages, luggage, people living in cities who were carting around groceries. The universal design for learning is very similar in that educational practices, which might have originally been meant for students with disabilities, now we're looking at education, figuring out how can we design it from the beginning, and how can we design instructional practices that make them accessible and beneficial to learners of all abilities and all different learning styles. Developing lessons by using the universal design for learning should provide benefits for all students in the classroom. You can easily reach students who have learning disabilities. You can also work with your students who are limited English proficient. But as well, when you use the universal design for learning, you can provide different accelerated options for your gifted learners. For example, using small guided reading groups that are based on a reading level and even on reading interest. You can do groups that are for your lower readers and group them together. That way you're daily pushing them at their instructional reading level. For your students who need to work on vocabulary, you can work with books where you're also working on just implementing more and more vocabulary and really being specific on that lesson. As well, you can do a small guided reading group for your more advanced learners where you allow them more independent practice and to really stretch their imagination with those books. Flexible guided math groups are another great way to implement the universal design for learning. Every time you come to a new content, a new objective, you can easily give a pretest and determine how your math groups really should be set up. And then you can rotate students through and work on the individual skills. You might have students that are still in the concrete area where they really need to use their manipulatives in order to really accomplish that goal or objective, whereas other learners might be ready to move on to the abstract. By having those flexible guided math groups, you're really able to implement the universal design for learning and work with each student really on their ability and with their real gifts. Choice boards for assessments and assignments are another great way for using the UDL. You can figure out different ways that students can show that they've really learned the material. For example, you can have them, some students would like to present an oral project if writing is more difficult for them. Others may be better with making even a PowerPoint. There could be students who would like to express themselves through poetry. or even an imaginative story. But by providing choice boards, there's ways that you can make sure that the students have hit each objective, that they've covered all of the SOLs, but they're expressing their knowledge in a different way. Digital textbooks are just another great thing that's happened with technology. It's made reading and it's made knowledge so much more accessible to all of our learners. For example, if you have a student who's reading below grade level, well, if they have their digital textbook, they can often just use the text-to-speech option and have the book actually read to them. Typically, the digital textbooks will also have a highlight feature where you can highlight them right there on the textbook, and you can even look up a word right there on the glossary, or even quickly go to dictionary.com when needed. And often the digital textbooks are actually made with varying levels of the book. And so you can actually sometimes find within the actual textbook a strand of the text that's read more easily. And then there's the computer-based learning programs such as MobyMax, ClassWorks, ReflexMath. All of these are programs that go with the learner. As the learner achieves more, they begin to challenge them more. When a student gets stuck in a certain area, the program is actually designed to keep remediating and helping that student learn so that they can achieve. And so therefore students who are learning more can go at a faster pace, and where students need more help, they can stay and continue to work on those. It's just a program that's designed with all learners in mind. As far as adapting and modifying the general education curriculum, you'll see varying degrees of this for each individual student. Therefore, that's why it's called the Individualized Education Program. Some students with IEPs may take every test without any accommodations or modifications, and they may be held accountable for all the state standards. There may be other students who only have accommodations either for presentation, setting, or timing, but the students are expected to show mastery of grade level standards and objectives. For example, you may have a student who has difficulty with reading. However, they're able to master the science and social studies curriculum when it is presented to them orally. So that would still just be an accommodation for them because they are still presenting, they are giving that material, they are able to show mastery of it. However, if it were reading comprehension and that were being read to them, that would no longer be considered an accommodation at that point, because at that point we really are modifying the curriculum and we're not ensuring that they are able to do reading comprehension activities on their grade level. But there still are modifications that we often use for students, but it would be a change in the presentation of the material, and the content and the goals for mastery are not quite the same. So they still might be learning about theme when they're doing reading, but they might, if they're in the 5th grade, they might have to use a 2nd grade level text in order to accomplish it. Or maybe whereas their peers might be writing an essay, we might be asking some of our students to write a paragraph. So they might still be expressing many of the same things, but what we are asking them to show is maybe less or modified. And then there is a very small percentage of students who actually have disabilities such as moderate and severe intellectual disabilities, which actually inhibit their ability to take statewide assessments. These students typically will have an alternative curriculum and will actually take alternative assessments. Some students will actually have related services as a part of their IEP, and this is something additional that they have that will help them achieve more and make more academic gains. There are actually 5 main areas of related services for students with disabilities. One is speech-language pathology services. Now, there are certain students who have speech as a primary disability. However, other students just have it as a related service. It means that they have a different primary disability, but by providing speech and language pathology services to them, they will receive some help with difficulties with communication and language. There are also occupational therapy services that some students may receive that will help students who have difficulties participating in school-related routines and activities. Some students might have difficulties even holding their pencil, opening up their food, just really being able to write even on the lines when they're doing a writing activity. Some of them even have difficulty staying in their seats. Occupational therapists provide excellent strategies for teachers and students to use to help them be able to participate better in academic activities. Physical therapy services. Some students have difficulties with their gross motor skills, and they need help with a physical therapist to even be able to move around the school, to be able to sit long enough to really be able to receive academic instruction. And physical therapists can really provide a lot of support in those areas, teaching strategies to the students, to the paraprofessionals, and to the teacher. Psychological services. Our psychologists administer tests, interpret tests, and provide educational assessments, and they're really there as a resource to help us figure out how we can best help and serve our students. And there can be social work services. Students might need help with transition planning, social skills training, or even conflict resolution, and our social workers can provide a lot of those for our students. Students with behavioral needs also need specialized instruction in order to be able to make academic gains, because often it's their social and emotional needs will inhibit them from being able to really participate academically and to make the achievements that they need to make. Now, there are many different types of programs. Sometimes they're universally designed programs, where it's a program for the whole school, maybe a positive behavior support system that the whole school is on. There could be also a specialized instructions for smaller groups. But any program for social emotional learning needs to attempt to really develop a program where you're really providing an interrelation of cognitive, affective, and behavioral competencies. And they're all going to have self-awareness skills, management skills, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. These skills are going to be taught explicitly. They will be modeled, and they're also going to have time for the students to really put them into practice through different interactions, and time to talk about and really how are they working to really reflect upon those skills. Interventions and RTI data must be taken, of course, for students who are demonstrating social and emotional needs. It is more difficult to have the RTI data in these situations. The norms and benchmarks for behavior and social interactions are not as clear-cut as academic norms, so it's often subjective when determining the severity of emotional behavioral concerns. Sometimes you can judge a student against himself if after an intervention you've seen the behavior improve, but as far as a benchmark for how many interruptions a teacher has per class period, that really differs as far as each classroom is concerned. There are 3 tiers for the RTI for the interventions. In Tier 1, it's going to be more like a universal program for the entire classroom or student population. Data is going to be taken to define it. Is there a problem? What would the problem be? and there could be class-wide interventions are provided if necessary. We might need to look and see, is it a class-wide problem? Is there a behavior management problem with the teacher? Does the teacher need a mentor? Are there instructional problems? Or is it really just a student problem? And they'll continue to take data to monitor the progress and to determine really what is going on there. From there, you can move to Tier 2. More specific data will need to be taken, and classroom or small group interventions are provided through counselors, parents, and teachers. You might be doing the intervention right there in the classroom, but with more explicit instruction, more individualized reward systems, and just more specific issues, not the whole general classroom, but more individualized to particular students and regular data collection. And then from there it goes to Tier 3. If some students still are not successful at Tier 2, more intense and individualized evidence-based interventions are necessary. Data will continue to be taken, and it could eventually end up with referral to special education if results still are not forthcoming. Most teachers have probably had the experience of having a student in their classroom who's demonstrated some signs of ADHD, some attention problems. Maybe they have difficulty staying in their seat, doing task completion, or just look like they're daydreaming. The great thing is many of the things that we're going to talk about for implementing for students with ADHD are actually wonderful things that will be of service to all students. Actually, they can be implemented for your ESOL students, for just any student, to help them keep on track and to help them improve comprehension and improve academic achievement. Teachers will often complain that maybe they're overwhelmed and don't have the time or supplies to either work or provide the necessary accommodations for students with ADHD. But many of the solutions are practical and easy. For example, sticky notes and highlighters are in every classroom, and they can easily be used by general education teachers to help organize students, and especially students with attention problems. For example, the teacher can make a parking lot where students can put their sticky notes for comments. Your ADHD child may need to make a comment all the time. But in this way, your students with attention problems are not sitting there raising their hands all the time or even shouting out. Instead, they have the opportunity to write it on a sticky note. They're learning some self-control then, and they know that their teacher will respond to them eventually. You can also use sticky notes for behavior management at the beginning of each period. Your students with attention problems can have 3 sticky notes, and at each warning a sticky note is removed. And then if they are left with no sticky notes, there could be a consequence or a prize if they still have them all. Highlighters can be used to keep place when reading, and also to help them just get a little bit of movement so that they're not fidgeting with other things, and they can highlight the words as they're reading, or even just with the top on, go along with the teacher as she reads. Sticky notes can be used to monitor comprehension, to track thinking, to keep place. This is useful for all students. And also, sticky notes and highlighters can both be used to organize tasks and responsibilities. They can be color-coded as to which ones are important or for subjects, or even some students like to do a task and then remove the sticky note, and that helps them realize where they are as far as work that needs to be accomplished for the day. So these are just really practical ways that can help students achieve more in the classroom, even if they do have attention problems. There are also some really practical ways to help students with attention problems, to help them with organization. Often your students who have ADHD or ADD, they often have trouble with organization. Sometimes they'll need the backpack check at the end of the day to make sure their books are in there, the agendas are in there. But we really want to give them and their teachers strategies to where they'll be more independent and they'll begin accomplishing more independently. So for example, each subject could have a certain color. That color could be the same color used for notebooks, for writing down that assignment, for where you turn that assignment in, and for the folder for that assignment, so that students aren't so overwhelmed of, well, where do I put it? What did I have to do for that subject? When they know that science is red, they know that, well, on the board, every assignment written in red is for science. I put my science homework in the red folder. I write my science notes in the red notebook. All those are just very practical ways that don't cost the teacher anything extra and will really help the students be more organized. You can also use visual cues and checklists for task completion. Being able, even a visual cues of 1s, 2s, and 3s, or even more importantly, using picture cards of what the first step is when they walk in for a morning routine. If it's to hang up the backpack, put a 1 and a picture of a backpack. If it's to write down their morning work next, a 2 and a picture of a student writing down the morning work. All those help students know what they're supposed to do next, and then just a little checklist for them to fill out that they've done that task. And multi-step directions are often difficult for students with any attention problems. They can be difficult for many types of students, though, so these accommodations will help many students in the classroom. You can break down the multi-step directions for projects into smaller steps and just give them step-by-step and smaller assignments. So for example, if they needed to write a 4-paragraph essay, we'll get them to write 1 paragraph and tell them the steps for that. Then the next paragraph and the steps for that, and so on until the project is actually complete. Self-monitoring is another excellent way to help students with ADHD. Students can be taught to self-monitor on-task behavior. Now, the teacher does need to train them, to model them. It also works best if the teacher is able to provide reinforcement with praise, or maybe a desired activity, or something that the student might be able to earn. This, the student can actually learn to stay on task, and it eventually leads to improved academic performance. And it's a skill that the student can learn to stretch out how long they stay on task and help them attend to teacher instructions and to become more successful in school.